Welcome to Everything House Music and More today, everyone. And we have a special guest, Kirk Townsend. Hey, Kirk, how you doing, brother?
I'm good, Maurice. How are you, sir?
I am very good, brother.
Great.
So, Kirk, before we get started, I want you to tell people that who's not from Chicago, just a brief synopsis of just your early ages. You know what? Better yet, we can go with question number one.
There you go.
Here we go. How did you get into DJing? And what year did you actually start mixing and beat matching at some time?
So when I started DJing, it was probably around late 1973. I had just some small house speakers, a little Radio Shack mixer, and two mix match turntables, like probably everybody had. And I was playing jazz for my dad's friends in the basement parties and stuff like that.
And what year was that?
That was probably late 1973.
Okay.
And then when I was in 8th grade, I had several influences. Let me backtrack a little bit. So one of my earliest influences, not just myself, but also Tony Hatchett and Andre Hatchett, both of our dads bowled at Starlight Bowling Alley on 87th and Cottage in Daddy O'Daly's Sunday Morning Men's League. And every Sunday, a guy named Millard Green would play jazz records while the guys bowled. And every now and then, Millard would play some different music. He was the first person I ever heard play Harlem by
Bill Withers.
Bill Withers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and this is back in the 60s. So, yeah, in the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
And so every now and then he would let Andre get behind the thing and play. So I remember Andre was like 4 years old sitting behind the table playing.
Wait, Andre Hatchett?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, because their dad and my dad, they bowled in the same league.
Okay.
And so as kids, we'd be running up and down and around the bowling alley. So that was one influence that I didn't know. So that influenced me to start doing the jazz for the guys, and because I could emulate a lot of the music that Miller was playing.
Okay.
And then in 8th grade, at the grammar school I was going to, I had a friend named Kenny Anderson. Kenny's father, George Anderson, was the engineer at Soul Train.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes after school, we would jump on the L, go downtown, and we would watch them tape Soul Trains.
Right.
And his dad would be playing the records. They had the Soul Train dancers down there.
And so people that don't know, Soul Train was filmed here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay. And where was that at?
Down at the Board of Trade building on West Jackson.
Wow.
So it was very interesting to watch. And I was like, I could get into this. And then when we had our 8th grade party, they asked George to come DJ our 8th grade party. Mm-hmm. And he brought the Soul Train dancers with him to our little grammar school.
Wow.
And he did something that really blew my mind. Mm-hmm. He did a lady's choice.
Okay.
And all the Soul Train dancers would go out and grab the guys that were there. And I mean, we're in 8th grade, man, at a Catholic grammar school. So
right.
We're like little, it was just amazing for something like this to happen.
Wow.
And as we go through the process, the big popular Soul Train dancer, she comes and grabs me, and we're dancing to Sexy Mama by the Moments.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, this is like 1974.
Right.
So
now, what were they beat matching at the time, or they were just playing?
Absolutely not. Just playing music and just trying to keep some kind of continual by being tight and maybe extend records here and there and cut through. Because remember, prior to 1976, there was no real mixer that was cueable.
Okay.
It didn't have a cue system. The only two things I knew of was one, Ken Samuels and Bob Simmons, who had Fox Player Sound at the time, had these built-in cueing into the boards that they had. and it had a little speaker that was set up on top of their racks, and they could switch from one turntable to the other, and you would just cue front end records and stuff like that just by listening to this little speaker.
Right.
So there was
No
no
headphones,
headphones,
right.
no.
Oh, wow.
So when I think between Uri and Clubman, when the Clubman 1-1 came out, that was one of the first cueable mixers where you can.
Wow. So everybody was loving it then when that came out.
Yeah, and things just kind of took off so real fast as everybody started playing with stuff. Now that you got a way to backtrack records and do different things and extend records, that was in the infancy of blending. It was mostly just to extend good records that, you wanted people to dance to a little bit longer or things of that nature. So
nice.
Yeah.
Also, tell the audience how you progressed from Mendel to DJing, overseeing what became the bi-level disco.
So, well, do you want to talk about Mendel? Because not everybody is probably.
Okay, so yeah, let's tell everyone who doesn't know about Mendel bi-level.
Yeah. So I went to De La Salle in my freshman year of high school. And I was starting to DJ, and I was doing parties, and I was doing stuff like the Roberts 500 Room, different events. I was doing the Lays with Class parties over at the University of Chicago, and I was gaining in popularity. And when I transferred and got to Mendel, the first day of school, Father O'Grady, who was the theology teacher, who also was the activities director.
Okay.
So he was responsible for putting on activities and stuff. And Mendel was well known in the past for doing parties on Sundays when the school was all white.
Right.
They did what they call social Sundays, and every Sunday they would have things in the gym, and it was mostly bands, and Mendel was responsible for spawning two of the largest bands in rock history.
Oh, wow.
Chicago and Styx.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
knowledge.
Yeah. So they were trying to extend it a little bit, and as the school was changing over, and the white flight out of Roseland, and they were trying to figure out a way, one, to draw more students in, and two, trying to fill the revenue gap that was being lost by the loss of all these students. So first day of class, Father O'Grady said, tomorrow I want you to bring a cigar box.
Okay.
And in it, I want you to put things that represent your life.
Okay.
So this was his way of trying to do like a show and tell, I guess, and that people got to know each other a little bit better. And so when I put mine together, I put in one a patch of a McDonald's patch, because I was already an assistant manager at McDonald's at 14.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So
wow.
I was I had the patch, and then I put a little yellow spindle in there.
For the 45s that people don't know.
Yeah, 45 spindle.
Right.
And I said, to show that I was, he said, well, what is this for? I said, well, I'm a DJ, and I DJ a lot of parties. He said, well, we do about 3-4 parties a year. We have the Winter Music Dance. We have the Easter Mission Dance, which they did a bi-level one, maybe twice a year.
Right.
And the Easter Mission Dance was the big one, where they would get all the students to come in, and they would send all the money made over to the missions in South America that they supported.
Okay.
So after doing that a couple of times, started out in the basement, and they already had a couple of DJs there. So I had to earn my salt. I had to come in and knock these guys off the hill.
Oh, wow. Now, did you have a DJ name at the time?
Just, yeah, I did.
Okay, what was it?
Sweet K the DJ.
Ooh, Sweet K the DJ.
Yeah. So after maybe doing 3 to 4 dances, it was starting to pick up and rock. I moved all the other guys out. I was doing the parties upstairs, and we would also have some sock hops after the basketball games on Friday night.
Okay.
And next thing you know, I went to Father O'Grady. I said, there's a way we could possibly do this every week
Right.
and do the bi-level and have a different DJ upstairs and downstairs.
Right.
By this time, I had met Tony Poindexter.
Okay.
And Tony, I said, if you want to, I'll get you in downstairs.
Right.
And I'll be upstairs. And, and we both were renting equipment, big equipment at that point from Ken Samuels.
Okay.
And so I said, okay. We started doing it. Next thing you know, the thing is just growing like crazy. He brought in his little brother, Steve Poindexter.
Steve Poindexter.
So Steve ended up, after we started. So by this time, it's maybe late 75, 76.
Now, did Steve go to school there also?
No,
Okay.
Steve went to Hyde Park.
Okay.
Along with somebody else we know.
Right.
And so along with Steve came John Hunt, who we call Buster, and also another kid that they all lived in the same neighborhood named Thaddeus. Thaddeus is no longer with us, but so as the start to take off, we're just growing this thing. I'm doing promotions every week for the different girls' schools, different taking tickets to the girls' schools. We're growing this thing, and before you know it, we're doing 3,000 kids every Saturday night.
Because Mendel was just a boys' school, correct?
All boys school,
All
yeah.
boys' school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're doing 3,000 kids every Saturday night.
And this was started in 75?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it just kind of grew by. So by the mid of 76, it's just booming.
Okay.
Booming. I mean, and the formats of music we're playing were kind of across the board. One, I was in 74. I got in as I was collecting music.
Right.
I had found out and got into discotheque.
Okay.
Which was a big record pool.
Right.
That Rocky Jones was a part of.
Right.
So I first met Rocky in 74. Wow. And Mike Mozzarella and all those guys, they were all part of discotheque, the record pool. And one thing I happen to notice sometimes, a lot of the big guys from the north side and the white dudes, they were like going home with stacks a little bit bigger than mine. I'm getting stacks like this. They got stacks like this. They walking out.
Right.
I'm like, oh, what's going on here? We're all paying the same dues, So just so happens a brother I knew named Ernest Lazenby. He was a tavern DJ on the south side, went by Ernest Dale.
Okay.
And Ernest was always a good brother. He came to me and said, hey, man, look, there's this other pool we're all going to, and it's a brother that's running it too. And we're all going to pool our resources together and get it done. I said, okay. Turns out it was Eddie Thomas and the Dogs of War.
Oh, wow.
So I got in the Dogs of War record pool.
Right.
And once we got in there, it just blew up big time. And by this time, every major black DJ in the city was getting records through either the Dogs of War or they were getting records directly from the record labels, depending upon your relationship with all the reps.
Right.
And so I'm meeting people, and then they're all coming to I met Alvin Thomas, who was Eddie's son, who happened to be the promotions rep for A&M Records at the time. So he gave me a record to break in early 1976. Wow. And the funny thing is, if you look in the 1976 Mendel Yearbook, I'm wearing a T-shirt to LTD Love to the World album.
Get out of here.
And so he gave it to me first and said, you could break this for me. And, we broke not only Love to the World, but also the ballad on there. Okay. Love's Ballad. Right. So, yeah.
Nice.
And yeah.
Wow.
So that was my first introduction into the relationship between DJ, record promoter, radio.
Okay. And that's that. And you did Mendel for how long?
Oh, I DJ'd myself till 81.
Okay.
And my interest started joining more towards radio.
Correct.
And I left Chicago for a year and worked in St. Louis and New York. and came back.
Okay.
So, and within the year, John and Steve and all those guys were handling everything
So
for me.
they
while
took
I
it
was
over
there.
after you left, and
Yeah,
then
but I was only gone for a year.
right.
So I came back, and then I was just running the parties every Saturday,
Right.
from doing the promotions and pulling everything together for everybody that's. So at that point, everything's changing over now.
Okay.
82, 83 comes the invention of more of the house tracks
right.
and or the disco tracks or however you want to call
Right.
them.
Right.
And we were bringing in a lot of different DJs. By then, Steve and Buster had already started bringing more and more guys on with us,
Okay.
like Chip Beasley,
Right.
Lil John,
Right.
Ferris, oh God, Little Boo.
Oh wow.
I mean, everybody wanted to be part of. I mean,
Right.
who didn't want to be a part of Mendel? I mean,
Right.
where else could you DJ at a venue playing for 3,000 to 4,000
Yeah.
kids
No.
every week?
That's good that you say that, because my take on Mendel, because I grew up in the suburbs. Not gonna lie, I'm a suburbs guy. But my first introduction to Mendel, where I actually spun at Mendel, was back in 84, 85, I believe it was. And believe it or not, the one who brought me there and who I was like, tagging along with was Mickey Mixon Oliver.
Oh wow!
Because Mickey was spinning at Mendel at the time, and I was just like, he was like, Mo, you want to spin with me? I'm like, oh my good, and that's why I saw Farley, and I was like, wow, okay, so yeah, that was my Mendel story right there.
Yeah. So, the thing of it was what cultivated all that was I had a close relationship with the Augustinians, who were the priests that were running the school,
Okay.
and I knew that Mendel is a 40-acre campus, so
Right.
they weren't used to running a plant that size. And at its height, they had 1,600 students easily.
Wow.
And my class, when I graduated in Mendel in 78, was the first all-black graduating class with a little under 900 students.
Oh wow.
So they were already at half the capacity
Right.
that they were used to being at. And the Augustinians were considering closing the school in 1979 because they just couldn't afford to keep,
The students
running a school that size.
Wow.
So the money, the revenue created by the dances literally kept the doors of the school open for another 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's heavy right there.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
Yeah. And that's why the Augustinians made sure and put me into the Mendel Hall of Fame.
Oh, nice.
Well,
congratulations on that.
Yeah. It's let me tell you a quick funny story behind that. I was sitting there in the induction ceremony, and I'm listening to all these guys that are being inducted with me. And I mean, there's some big shots in there.
Right.
I know if you ever watched the Cubs, Bulls, or White Sox game, and you heard Harry Carey. This broadcast was produced and directed by James T. Angio.
Yeah.
He was in my induction class.
Wow.
We had a guy that was a nuclear submarine commander that was in my induction class. We had another guy, Bill Callahan, who was a minority owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks, and so it was. I'm listening. I'm like, I'm sitting there because Townsend is last. They're going alphabetically. I'm like, what the hell are they gonna say about me? I was a DJ.
Right.
And when they finally got to me and they introduced me, and they let a friend of mine who's a judge introduce me, and we had known each other since kindergarten. And he said that along with Father Bill Sullivan, he said, no one person raised more money for this school than this person here. And I was like, wow. And everybody's like, and I'm like, wow.
That's
it
big,
didn't.
Kurt.
Yeah, it really didn't dawn on me.
Yeah.
So that was a good legacy.
And it was good that they appreciated you and remember that, because, you being black and just in that school like that, they could have just surpassed and be like, we don't need to give me any props or anything like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was good.
They've always been good to me. The first time I got an award was in 1977 when Blandick was mayor.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
yeah, and they came out and they gave me a plaque, stopped the party one night, gave me a plaque, kind of like what they did with the Chosen Few,
Yeah.
with the city proclamation
Correct.
and all that stuff. And
Right.
the plaque read, what I did for Mendel High School and the city of Chicago.
Well,
And
good.
blah,
See,
blah, blah.
and that's why we're doing this type of show so people will understand
Yeah.
what was your role in the history of house, Kirk.
Yeah.
So one could argue those parties played an even bigger role in shaping house culture than the warehouse.
Absolutely.
If you had to support that theory, how was Mendel bigger for house than the warehouse?
Well, one of the obvious things would be sheer numbers.
Okay.
Because if you ever been to the original warehouse or U.S. studios, a good night, you get 250 to 300 people in
Right.
there. And that's packed to the rafters.
Right.
It wasn't a big place.
Okay.
And, depending upon if you talk to a lot of the old heads, or the old,
You just
older,
say elders.
the elders of their theory on the house music terminology is slightly different in some cases. A lot of
Correct.
people think it came from, because if you take a look at it from a chronological standpoint,
Okay.
so it opened in 1978. It closed in 1981.
That's the warehouse.
The
you're
warehouse,
talking about,
the
yes.
original warehouse,
The original warehouse.
U.S. Studios,
Right.
206 South Jefferson.
Right.
So, and then Frankie moved to the power plant, and Robert went on to the music box, and all the
Right.
different things that went on. But there's three things you got to pay attention to. So, culturally, homosexuality was not out of the closet at that point.
Correct.
Not like it is
now.
today.
Correct.
And so a lot of people had to do things in private. And by me having, since 76, started buying my own equipment
Right.
and ascertaining a lot of equipment, I was renting equipment too. And I rented to a lot of the gay disc jockeys, Craig Cannon, Gene White,
Right.
Michael Ezebuku,
Right.
Sharon Webb,
Correct.
who spent for all the girls.
Wayne Williams. No, just playing.
Here we go.
Just kidding, Wayne. I had
Here
to
we
throw
go.
that in, man. I had to throw that in.
So I was used to being around a lot of the, plus my business partner that I had at that time, Fred Woods.
Right.
Fred was the Altec dealer, so we had shaping all this equipment.
wow. Okay.
And Fred had a residency at a little gay bar down on 39th Street, right next to Rockchild's Liquors, across the street from the big church there.
Okay.
It was called Peyton Place.
Wow.
And it was a gay
I forgot
club.
about that.
They used to have the gay follies there. They used to have gay clubs at Herbs on 411 East 63rd. There were a lot of hidden places.
Yeah.
I remember they used to do parties at right the corner of 75th, excuse me, and what would that be? Evans.
Okay.
There was a trophy shop there, but it was owned by this guy who was gay. And they would black out the windows, put paper across the windows and stuff. And they have some huge parties in there.
Wow. So, okay, hold your thought right there.
Okay.
So, at that time, from 75 to say about 83, 84, when people went to Mendel, what were they saying? What type of music they want to go hear? So let's go to Mendel to hear.
So culturally, again, you gotta understand the cultures that persist during those times. So it was probably a culmination of disco, funk, R&B, and records rotated probably every 3 months.
Okay.
So, artists were putting out music like crazy back then. They were cranking it out. And there was never a time where I was at a loss for playing music because everything was coming out. You created new trends. And the main culture was the dance dictated the music. So as dance got to be a little more freer, where it wasn't dictated where you had to be a boy and a girl dancing, the more lucid the music became.
Right.
But depending upon the type of dancing you were doing, and then it was the time of the dance groups,
Okay.
like the doctors, the secretaries,
Right.
the nurses. And
that's when it made a culture thing.
it was a whole culture. So
Right.
just like with hip hop,
Yeah.
the break dancers.
Yeah, and that's what people don't understand, that we had to wear a code of dressing. For all
Absolutely.
the house parties, and
Absolutely.
everything we went to. So we had that here in Chicago, but people really don't talk about it.
Same thing happened. They had the painter's pants, the
Right.
T-shirts.
Yep.
They would have their
The biker's hat.
It'd be
back in
coordinated,
yep,
and
exactly.
it'd be and it was part of the culture.
Yes.
So it could change. I mean, I remember like one of the first 12 inches I've got was like. It was a promo copy from Motown of Down to Love Town.
Oh my goodness!
With Fancy Dancer
original,
by the
yeah.
Commodores on
Right.
the flip side of it.
Wow.
And then probably the next biggest one I got was because 12 inches weren't even in existence at this point. They just started filtering those into the marketplace late 75, early 76.
Wow. Okay.
So,
So everything was 45 still.
45 or 33.
Yeah, 33, yeah.
45 or 33. So you had to play with what but the 12 inches hit so much harder than the album version. So if you were going from an album to a 12 inch, you had to have the 12 inch volume down here and the album volume, and you trying to throw it in there or slide it in there.
So now
it was hard to do.
Was Mendel at the time all straight, or was it gay too, or what? Mixture?
Well, I'm sure there were some people there that were identifying in some way or form, but remember, it's not open at this point.
It's still
So it didn't matter one way or the other. I know Angie Foster, not to name out anybody, but
you just did.
I did. I guess I did. She went to Aquinas, and she's openly gay now, but she was always a little,
of course.
But I love Angie to death. Always has. That's my road dog. Okay. But she was coming to the parties every week, and
well, that's good.
And it was all about the dance and having fun,
and just having fun.
Yeah. And so, but the culture of it also dictated the type of music. So it could be a multitude of different things.
Right.
I could play now. Salso's coming on board.
Right.
Remember, disco was just
starting. Right.
And it's now you got Salso, you got West End, you got
Prelude coming in.
Prelude. I mean, D Train. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So now you're really stepping it up a little bit. And but prior to that, and I'll give you another story real quick. So probably one of the greatest things that happened to me at Mendel was in the summer of '77, and this white kid came up to because everybody's hearing about this. I mean, who's not hearing about this place that's throwing these parties every Saturday night?
It was the hottest place
upstairs and downstairs. I heard somebody call it the first rave party.
Wow!
Because you constantly rotating between two DJs and you're getting a multitude of different types of music. But and this guy ends up on stage with me, and he's like, "I got something I want to give you." Mm-hmm. I'm like, "Okay." And I look at him, and I didn't recognize him. But so it turns out this kid lived in I forget where he lived, either Alsip or one of the western suburbs here.
Okay.
And it turns out it was Peter Brown.
Oh, get out of here.
And he had the acetate of Do You Want to Get Funky With Me?
Oh, wow.
Which was a stalwart at Mendel because we were the ones to break the song.
And he was from Chicago.
He was. He lived in either Alsip or right, not far from one of these little suburbs, and when I put it on and I queued it up and I heard it, I was like, wow.
So you broke that record right there at Mendel.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
See? Look at that. Y'all hear it right here, y'all, on the show right here. Everything house music and more. So you were at ground zero for the birth of house as a genre. Mm-hmm. You were the first to promote it at radio. You even got mainstream play for Jesse Records.
Yes.
Why do you think house was not accepted in Black America in the way that hip-hop actually was?
Because most things prior to that had been live music, and they were reluctant to accept digital music.
Wow.
And that's all it was.
Okay.
And the powers that be in the major labels they just weren't going for it. They were used to putting these budgets
Yeah.
into these studios. You got live strings,
Yeah.
keys,
Right,
live
right,
drums,
right.
and now all of a sudden you got somebody sitting back here with a with a 808
Right, right, right.
and they're like, that ain't real music.
Right.
So a lot of times that was virtually it,
Wow.
and until probably Warner was one of the more stalwarts that kind of stretched out a little bit, and
Okay.
probably because WEA, which
Right.
was
The distribution company.
this for Warner
Right.
Electro Atlantic,
Right.
was the only big label in Europe.
Right.
WEA was the label. It was no
Yeah.
Warner
Correct.
Electro. Everything was WEA.
Right.
So as house music started taking off across the pond, it was like they understood the volume that was going on over there.
Right.
And so it was easy for Warner Brothers to try and transpose. So like when Jesse was approached by Geffen.
Okay. Wait. Before we go there.
Okay, before we go there.
Before
All
you
right.
getting ahead of the
Yeah,
game.
yeah, yeah.
So let's ask this question. What I ask everybody.
Yes.
Where did the term house music come from in your perspective?
In my perspective, I remember just talking to some of the older heads. So because the gay community was not out,
Okay.
they did a lot of private parties.
Right.
And this was the music that they were playing. The stuff you heard like at Studio 54.
Right. Disco. It was all disco.
Disco
Right.
and but in New York they were playing disco that was a little more soulful, and by Frankie coming from New York,
Right.
it was easy for him to introduce some things that was not necessarily a big movement here.
Okay.
And he wasn't doing the regular disco like they were doing at Studio 54,
Okay.
where most of that was European, the Giorgio Moroder,
Right,
and all
right.
the others, and so, but they were doing more of the soulful disco stuff, and by him,
So it's predominantly black disco. What we were talking
sure,
about. Yeah.
and but a lot of the gays here were already listening to that,
Right.
and they were playing that, so. A lot of them were doing it in these large homes that they had in South Shore,
Right.
and these huge apartments and stuff, and they were having private parties there. And because a lot of these places were real old, they didn't have air conditioning, all that stuff.
Wow.
They had the windows open and stuff, and people would walk by and hear some music they weren't used to hearing.
Okay.
And they would say, "Oh, that's that house music, the stuff you hear in those houses over there." That's where people probably in my age bracket, 60 and up,
Okay.
would say
That's where house music
term
came from. The
came
term
from.
house. Okay.
Now, there are those who state that, that it came from the warehouse,
Right.
and it was the music Frankie played at the warehouse
Correct.
that gave it the terminology, which is funny to me because I saw the interview with Frankie, who had
Right.
no idea
Yeah,
what they were talking
that is
about.
true. He said that.
In terms of house music.
Correct.
So he never considered that,
Right.
house music or the warehouse had that kind of, so, but I can see how a lot of people, as now they're starting to venture into it.
Right.
And go into these places that were forbidden for a long time to go to.
Right.
And they are hearing this stuff for the first time, and they're like, wow, this is that warehouse music. So they just kind of called it house music. So
Right.
I think there's probably room enough for both to coexist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's why we hear the. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's still a big issue for some people, so we know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So they say house was created by kids who was taken advantage of by labels out here in Chicago. You were the most elder out of the crew. How come you didn't have more influence in stopping the predatory practices of the labels taking advantage of us back in the day?
Well, two reasons. One, I was the vice president of Just Say Records.
Okay.
And the other guys were our competitors. We had competitors.
Yeah.
And that came along. And everything was flying so fast.
Mm-hmm.
I had warned people for years about certain parties that I won't say right now,
Right.
that were part of a record pool that I was a part of,
Right.
and saw how things have shifted back then in
Kirk,
'74.
it's been years. Say the pool, man.
So anyway, I Rocky had kind of a shifty name
Okay.
and
Right. Right. Right.
shifty,
Right.
you know,
This is part of history, man.
yeah, it's a
It's
part of
part of it.
history.
So yeah.
So I'm like, listen, you guys going to do business with Rocky, just be careful,
Right.
you know.
So did you ever do anything with Larry Sherman Trax Records at that time?
Yeah, I did. So the funny thing is, Trax Record belonged to Just Say Records. It was a subsidiary of our company. We traded Larry Trax Records for a pressing deal
I heard that.
we had 3 labels.
That's you. That's Vince Lawrence and Jesse Saunders, correct?
Jesse was the president.
Okay.
I was the vice president. Vince was the head of sales.
Okay.
Dwayne Buford was the head of distribution.
Okay.
And then we brought in Grant and
Wow.
and then Byron and all kinds of. So we had 4 labels. We had Jesse, which was going to be the mainstay.
Right.
Then we had Les Noise,
Okay.
which was strictly
that.
just a little track
Yep.
thing, when we needed money,
Right.
operating capital, throw some stuff out there.
Right.
We had Precision,
Yeah. Precision.
and we had Dance Mania.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not
Which
know
we
that.
did the deal with Ray Barney.
Right.
So, and then we had Tracks, which we had, if you notice, if you've got a Tracks record
Right.
with a black and white label,
Right.
that's a Just Say Records product. If you got it with a red and white label, that's a Larry Sherman product.
Really?
Ah.
I just thought they just push up because they know how to more colors, they ran out of that color, so because they was blue, they was green.
Larry had,
it was
well,
white,
yeah. I mean, but
know?
Larry had plenty of colors left over from
Wow.
all those. What was the name of that company? They used to advertise on TV, all those records. He would take their records and crush them up and.
Oh my! I remember that. Yeah. I forget
Yeah,
the name.
redo the
Yeah.
vinyl, and
Wow.
that was Larry's forte.
Okay, so here's one for you. Why aren't you a member of the Chosen Few DJs?
At the time, the Chosen Few were competitors to me as well.
Okay.
So that's a very interesting question. I've always kind of
I stumped you on that one.
yeah, you did. Always kind of followed my own path. I
Okay.
mean, I had a crew myself,
Right.
and everybody was jumping on board. And it's a funny thing. So, like in the early '70s, when I was playing, at the height of my popularity, man, if it was 6 parties a night in the city, I did all 6 of them.
Wow.
And I had multiple copies of records
Right.
from the pools,
Right,
and
right.
then I was a Billboard reporter for the record pool.
Correct.
And so, I mean, I had stuff. I started.
So you never talked to Wayne or anything, but we should come together and then.
Here's the interesting part about that.
Okay.
So, one, my thing was always about making money
Right.
and doing the business.
Right.
So, as Wayne and Jesse progressed, let me just throw this in here before we go that way.
Okay.
So, Wayne had started DJing, doing house parties with Uric, and who was his sister's boyfriend at the time. Okay. And he and Uric he would play records while Uric would go dance with his sister and do stuff like that. So then I was doing parties at St. Albie's, and it was a thing. Like if I did a party at St. Albie's and we had another party at Soul Queen right across the street,
Right.
I did both parties. I would run back and forth playing. I'd leave Steve and I'm doing stuff.
That's just being greedy, Kirk.
No, I mean, when you become popular, you're in demand. So it wasn't like the thing now where you come in, you do an hour, you go somewhere else, do an hour, and we did parties. When we sat down to DJ, we were supposed to do the whole party, which was generally only 4 to 5 hours. But so I'm at Mendel one night. No, I'm at St. Albie's one night, and this little kid comes up to me, and he's a little scrawny kid, and got on these glasses and this Opie haircut, and he says, "Hey man, I can DJ. Let me DJ. Let me DJ."
Right.
I don't know who he is. I'm like, get your goofy ass out of here. So turns out it's Wayne.
Oh my goodness.
And he was working across the street at White Hen Pantry there on 91st and Stony.
Oh,
And
okay.
I said, "No, man, go on. I'm in the middle of doing my thing."
And what year was this?
Oh, God, this is maybe early 70, maybe late 75.
Okay.
So then about 6 months or so go by, and I'm on the stage at Mendel, the place is packed.
Right.
And here he comes again. How he got on the stage, I don't know. But just so happens my mom happened to be at the party with me that night.
Okay.
And my mom sees them both on stage, and Jesse's with him.
Okay.
And Jesse's like blown away at how this party is.
Right.
I mean, it's a sight to behold.
Yeah.
If you're on that stage and you're looking out and you see that place just packed wall to wall and everybody in.
And do you have pictures of that?
Yeah, I do actually.
All right, send it to me and we're gonna flash it on the screen when you say that.
So I'm doing the party, and Mom goes over there and she starts hugging on Jesse, and I'm like, what is going on here? Turns out Jesse and Wayne end up being my cousins. She's like, these are your cousins. So I was like, that's what I told her. I said, get out of here.
Wow.
So, I kind of gave them some levity after that, and we started letting them have equipment whenever they needed.
Nice.
We started doing a lot of things together, which brings about a very interesting question why I was never asked to be one of the chosen few.
Wow.
But by that time, I was probably, by the time they really started kicking on, I was moving on the radio.
Okay.
And that's what stopped me from DJing. My interest waned from that to radio.
Oh,
and
see, that's good. See, people didn't know that.
Radio became my first love. And if you don't love it, don't do it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So now, this comes to the end of the questions. Name me your top 3 house records of all time.
Woo!
Now, not disco. We talking about Chicago house.
Chicago house.
Now, or you can just be like, you know what? I'm going to put my disco in there. But name me your top 3 Chicago house records.
Because if you remember, Mo, back in the early days, people, what they consider house music was like the old disco.
That is true. That is true.
Like Isaac Hayes,
Okay.
I Can't Turn Around.
Right.
That's not a house record.
Right.
But that's what they consider house.
Yeah.
Hit and Run, Lolita Holloway.
Right.
That's not a house record. That's disco.
Right.
They considered it house.
So so you can go ahead and you can do the old school disco. Name me top 3 of your records right now.
Top 3 of my records.
Yes.
Move Your Body would have to be one.
Okay.
I mean, that's just
self-explanatory right there, right?
Yeah. Wonderful would be 2.
Okay, and that's by
Terry Hunter.
There you go.
And Teresa Griffin.
Right.
Oh God. Probably Let No Man Put Asunder.
Okay. Well, there you guys. Y'all heard it from my man Kirk. Sweet K as what they call him back in the day. Kirk, I really appreciate this, man. Thank you for taking the time out to do the show,
man. We
man.
can go for another 3 hours.
Oh, I know we can, but unless you want to be a sponsor of the show, man, we can do that then.
Well, how much? Here,
Okay.
wait a minute. I got
all right, y'all. Something's going on with this technical difficulties.
I got
$1.50. Again, brother, thank you for this. I love you, man. Thank you for doing this.
Love you too, man.
I just wanted people to know.
I got to tell you.
Yes, sir.
Listen, man, I am so proud of all you've achieved.
Thank you, brother.
Throughout your career.
Yes, sir.
My hope and my legacy will always be, one, the amount of people that I brought into this business and influenced in this business. And one, where people thought DJing was a joke. Right. Now they understand it as a serious business.
And I can see you're part of a friend and great friend because I've been knowing you for years, man. Yeah. And I just want people to know your story, brother, because everybody see you around. They be like, well, how he know about this? Now they know your story. And there's a lot more to know. But y'all can hit up Kurt on social media himself. He's all on there. And once again, thank you for tuning in for everything in house music and more. Thank you, Kirk. I appreciate it, brother. Love you, man.
You too, Mo.
Peace.